everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of the 2024 version of Roadhouse. Released on Amazon Streaming on Friday the 22nd of March 2024, it stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Daniel Melchior, Conor McGregor and Billy Magnussen, and it was directed by Doug Liman. It is of course a remake of the cult favourite actioner from 1989, which originally had Patrick Swayze in the lead role as club bouncer Jimmy Dalton, who takes a job within Missouri, trying to get the club Double Juice back on its feet by getting rid of all of the brawlers and drug dealers. He later also has to deal with the town crime lord Brad Wesley, who dominates all of the civilians. And you can check out my review of the original from 1999 within the channel, and I'll leave a link within the description. Now, in terms of this 2024 version, it follows a similar outline where we see former UFC fighter Elwood Dalton, who makes a living in underground fighting, where he wins fights because his opponents will simply refuse to fight him because of his notorious reputation. Elwood is approached by Frankie, who owns a large bar called the Florida Keys. She recruits Dalton as a head bouncer to help cope with the rough brawlers who continually terrorise the bar. Making an instant impression, Dalton's actions draws more opponents for him to take down, and he also catches the attention of the doctor named Ellie, as well as build a strong connection with other town civilians. He eventually has to deal with wealthy mafia boss Benny Brandt, who wants to seize the land from the Roadhouse bar in order to build a casino resort. As with the original, the conflict between Dalton and Brandt continues to intensify as innocent people get drawn into the crossfire, and Dalton has to go all out to draw a final end to the conflict. Now, as with all remakes to celebrated movies from the 80s, the initial instinct is to draw a comparison from the original. But if we take Roadhouse as a standalone film, this version is very much a muddling, generic movie, for the most part of which I felt indifferent. The story itself meanders at a very slow pace, and it's very lacking and lifeless in terms of its tone, personality and characterization. Even the fight scenes are a bit dull and uninspiring. As with so many of streaming movies, I just wasn't that engaged in what was going on, and it actually began to lose my attention towards the end of the climax, when it should have much more of a momentum and excitement. Now, visually, the movie has that greyish, saturated HD contrast. The daytime scenes are fine, but when we come to the nighttime scenes, they're very darkly lit, and sometimes you can't make out what's going on, especially in terms of the fight scenes. It's just one of those movies that after a while, you just leave on in the background whilst you're doing other things. It certainly goes for a slam bang finale finish as we get loads of big fights and boat chases, all very crisply shot, but again, it just feels by the numbers overall. Now, in terms of the positives, I think Jake Gyllenhaal is very likeable in the lead role. The character Dalton is for the most part very relaxed and easygoing. Now, we do have the aspect of him being burdened by his past fights within UFC, and once more we have the typical narrative of the hero having an inner conflict, always holding back on his true power in fear that he'll go too far. Now, this is fine overall, but then we get a very strange turn 2/3 of the way through that almost presents Dalton as some sort of unhinged psychopath that actually enjoys exhibiting all of this violence. We have these mini monologues that he constantly speaks about as he's taking down all of his opponents. Now, the film doesn't push any further in terms of this direction, which I think was overall to its benefit. Now, to be fair, there was nothing wrong with any of the other cast in terms of their performances, but there was a severe lack of chemistry and dynamic, robbing Dalton of that truly great supporting character to bounce off. We then talk of Conor McGregor's inclusion as the crazy psychotic henchman brought in halfway through after the other members of Brandt's gang failed to take Dalton down. Now, I can understand bringing Conor in with his loud, brash, erratic personality, which on paper should have livened things up, bringing a heightened sense of jeopardy and menace. But it just doesn't work here, and overall it's a very laughable, one-note performance, very much not in the so bad it's good sense. Actually, it's actually very bad and continues to get even worse as the story goes on. So we do then eventually bring in the comparison to the original, and yes, the 80s version is by far more entertaining and watchable. It's by no means an 80s masterpiece, but if you look at everything from the aesthetic, the cinematography, the characterization, there's much more colour, much more energy, and much more charm to it. Now, it will be argued that the original was very much a product of its time, which is true, and that certain elements had to be toned down as they wouldn't work today for a contemporary audience. But by taking that approach, you take away what was special in the first place about Roadhouse, and what you're left with is a very mundane and dull version by comparison. We take for example the romance between Dalton and the Dr. Elizabeth Clay in the original, where both Patrick Swayze and Kelly Lynch very much embodied the typical sex symbol archetypes. Kelly Lynch especially was all tall, statuesque, curvy and blonde and beautiful, so you could truly believe that these two individuals would be instantly attracted to one another at first sight, and there's a real sexual chemistry between the two, and the film did spend a decent amount of time in terms of the overall romance. Now, by comparison, in this new version, Dalton and Ellie have very little spark. Actress Daniela Menical is very pretty, but any potential hotness or sexual demeanour is toned down, so you're never convinced about the true attraction between the two individuals. We then compare the standout fight sequence between Dalton and Reno in the original, a truly intense fight sequence within the lakeside, which resulted in Dalton taking out Reno furiously by cutting his throat. We compare that then with a similar scene where we see Dalton approaching the house with one of the combatants here, and after giving a non-too-threatening monologue about how he shouldn't be pushed too far because he's afraid of what he'll do, he then gives a quick jab to his opponent in the neck and then he just drowns. Again, it's far more shorter and far less net worthy. And this is another example of them trying to tone down the intensity and the violence in order to make it much more accessible. And the issue of toning these elements down brings the constant point about these remakes and where we are currently in movies today. Now, yes, of course, the 80s movies were over the top, outlandish and far-fetched, but they were also larger than life and had a real soul, heart and real charm about them. They had lots of great characters and personality, and this is what made them very memorable and fun to watch. If we look at movies today that are so eager to appeal to that social media contemporary audience, yes, they may be far more grounded and more realistic and more diverse, but are also far less appealing and less impressionable and just overall a bit dull and boring. And this Roadhouse movie remake is sadly another indication of where we are in terms of pure entertainment and escapism, and it still stands today that the 80s movies simply did it far more better and far more successful, and that's why they continue to get remade to this day. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings when looking at the Roadhouse remake from 2024. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you have any other further topics, movies or television series that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, then also let me know within the comments and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please consider hitting like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves and I will see you very, very soon.